Hello everybody, my name is Tactical Twinkie, and welcome back to my series of VTuber Teaches You Japanese. This is going to be lesson number 2. If you were around for lesson number 1, you know what we covered. It was last week. I know that this one is coming out a little late, so I do apologize. I was running into some technical difficulties with my model, but don't you worry, we got them all sorted out now, so let's go ahead and jump into today's lesson. So as you know, last lesson we covered both hiragana and our greetings and phrases, which you should have had some time to practice by now. I know this video is a little late, I'm sorry. So let's go over what we're going to learn in today's lesson. Today's lesson is going to consist of katakana. We're going to have a long list of vocab. Don't you worry, take as much time as you need to practice each of those words. We are also going to have sentence building and sentence structure, counting, telling time, and ages. I know that the course load seems like a lot, but I promise we're gonna get through it, and you can always pause the video and go back to any part that you may have some confusion on. You are also totally welcome to leave a comment, and I will try my best to answer your questions. So, let's get started with our learning for today. Starting us off, we have katakana, which is the foreign alphabet. This is what we use when a word does not pre-exist in Japanese. It is written in katakana, for example, US states. So, let's go through each of them together, starting with our main vowels. A, I, U, E, O. Ka, ki, ku, ke, ko. Sa, shi, su, se, so. Ta, chi, tu, te, to. Na, ni, nu, ne, no. Ha, hi, fu, he, ho. Ma, mi, mu, me, mo. Ya, you, yo. Ra, ri, ru, re, ro. Wa, o. And then all by itself, all over again, our little consonant, remembering that it's its own syllable. So, let's get into some writing practice. Now that we've seen it and we've gone through it, we're going to practice writing it. Again, I'm going to pause between each character, giving you enough time to go ahead and write it down. So, let's start with our main vowels. I know that we are missing the vowels over here, but don't you worry, it sticks to the same pattern as the chart before. So, a, I, U, E, O, all the way down. So, again, let's start with our main vowels, starting with a. So, a starts with this sideways, almost triangle shape, followed by our second stroke, which is a slanted / curved vertical line that comes down right next to it, noting that they don't connect at the top. It almost looks like a geometrical P, but again, we see here that they don't connect. Make sure you leave that break. Alright, let's move on to E. So E almost kind of looks like a scale without the little, trays leading one direction. So let's start with our first stroke. It is a vertical, slanted, and curved line that comes down to the left side here. Starting at the right, coming down to the left. We then, right in the middle, have a vertical line that intersects with it, making sure that we don't have a little tail above it. We want it to be just flat with our top part, and that is E. Alright, moving on to U. So U starts with this first little antenna on top, followed by a little bit longer of a dash to our left, and then almost like a curved 7 shape. Remember, it intersects with the second stroke but doesn't go through it. And then again intersects with our first stroke as we come across this horizontal part, and then it comes down in a curve. Like I said, just like a little curved 7. And that is how we get All right, let's move on to e. So e almost looks like an I in our English language, but it is very important to note that our first stroke, this top line, is shorter than our bottom one. We do not want these to be the same length. So let's take it from the top. We start with a shorter horizontal line on top, a vertical line that comes down in the middle of that shorter line up top, creating almost like a T shape. And then we have that longer horizontal line that intersects with our second stroke, creating that I looking shape. Again, making sure to note that our bottom line is longer than the top. All right, let's move on to all. So all starts with this little horizontal line. It's pretty long. I say little, but you know, it starts with a long horizontal line intersected by our second stroke, which is a vertical line with that little tail that we have seen so many times with hiragana. Make sure that you do have the tail up top here though. Make sure you have that little part sticking out, the little antenna, quote unquote. And then our third stroke is a slanted / curved line that comes out to the left side of our original T shape. All right, let's move on to ka. As you can see, it is very similar to our hiragana ka. The only thing that is really different is it doesn't have this third stroke, this little dash, and it's also a lot more geometrical, a lot sharper edges here. So we start, just like we do with ka, with our first stroke being this horizontal line, slanted upwards, then we bring it to a point, bring it down, curved just a little bit, and then we finish it off with that check or tail or whatever you want to call it, going back in. Then we start with our second stroke, which comes up above our original first stroke, and then through it in a curved vertical line. Remember, it's curving to the left, just like our tail should be coming in towards the left. All right, let's move on to ki. So as we can see here, much like our last one, this one is very similar to our hiragana ki. This is the top half of the ki that we see in hiragana. So what we do is we start out with a slanted horizontal line. Remember, this top line needs to be shorter than our bottom one. Our second stroke is now that bottom slanted horizontal line, a little bit longer than our top one. And then our third stroke is a vertical, also slanted line that comes through both of them, leaving that little antenna on top. All right, let's move on to ku. So ku starts with this stroke out to the side, a slanted vertical line to the left. It's slanted to the left. And then it's followed by that curved 7 shape that we kind of see in oo, but we need to make sure that this one is slimmer. We don't want this to be as wide as our oo vowel. I think I accidentally called this ku, but you know what I meant. I meant oo. So yeah, we start the second stroke, make that kind of curved 7, and there we have ku. All right, let's move down to ke. So ke almost kind of looks like our ku, but just a little bit different if the lines were brought out a little longer. So as we see here, we start again with that slanted stroke on the left. Remember, this needs to be curved. We don't want this to be like just a straight line. We need to have a little bit of curve to it. Our second line then intersects with that first stroke, not coming through it, just intersecting with it. Horizontal line. And then our third stroke intersects with that horizontal line, our second stroke, and comes down in that curved shape that we saw in that first stroke. Both going out to the left. All right, let's move on to kol. So the way that I like to remember kol is it almost looks like 3/4 of a rectangle. So let's start with our top line. Our top line is gonna be that first angle, this first little like right angle or triangle or whatever you want to think of it as. So we start, bring it down, and then our second stroke intercepts with that first kind of top half of our rectangle and creates the 3/4 of a rectangle. Alright, so let's move on to sa. So sa starts with this long horizontal line. It almost kind of looks like the, if we had that horizontal line coming through it. So we start with that horizontal line. Then we start with the stroke on the left. This one's going to be our second stroke, remembering to make it shorter. We don't want this to be as long as our third stroke here. So a shorter vertical line. And then off to the right, we start with our third stroke, which is a longer line that curves under that second stroke. Alright, our next one is going to be she. I know this one can be easily confused with su, but the way that I like to differentiate them is she is a smiley face looking up versus su is a smiley face looking down. So let's start with our upward facing smiley face, she. So she is gonna start with the first quote unquote I on top, this little dash, followed by our second I on bottom, another dash. And then this one we start low and come high, making sure that it is a curved line because, you know, our smiley faces are gonna have little curved mouths. Starting from the bottom, coming up to the right to make that curved mouth. Alright, let's move on to su. So su is gonna have that same shape that we saw with ku and u, that same little slanted, curved 7. So we start with the horizontal line that comes up across the top, bring it down in a curved line that goes back towards it, back towards like our top line, so like a 7, like a curved 7. And then our second line intersects about halfway through that almost like second curve. So like, you know, as we see, we go through the horizontal line and then it curves down. Halfway through that, we have our second stroke, which goes off to the right and is going to be just a little slanted line, slanted vertical line. It almost looks like if you were trying to draw a stick figure and you had the legs open like they were walking. Or if you added a little head, it could be a little Naruto running one. Alright, let's move on to se. So se looks a lot like our hiragana se. But the difference that we see here is this first stroke is that kind of check mark shape. See, it is a slanted horizontal line, making sure that we note that it's slanted upwards. And then we bring that tail of that quote-unquote check mark down underneath it. And then our second stroke is going to intersect with it. As we see, it has this kind of a bit of a longer antenna up top that comes down into a curved L shape. Making sure that it's not a super harsh turn. We don't want it to be like a really hard angle. It's just a nice soft L curve. And that is going to make our se. So let's move on to sol. So sol almost looks like tsu, but instead of having 2 eyes, our smiley face now only has 1. So instead, we're going to start with that first eye shape, that little downward facing dash, followed by our second stroke, which is going to start up top versus what we saw in she, where it started on bottom. Start at the top and bring it down to the left in a curved line. Alright, let's move on to ta. So ta looks a lot like ku, But our difference here is this little stroke in the middle that connects the two lines. So we start with our first stroke, that vertical, slanted, curved line that curves out to the left. And then we have that nice little curvy 7 that intersects with that first stroke, this being our second stroke, obviously. We come out horizontally and then down in a curved shape. And then our third stroke is going to be a line in the middle that connects the two of them, making sure that it is around the middle of both lines. And if you look at it, it almost kind of looks like a slanted curved A. Slanted to the right, it has a little bit of a curve, but it almost kind of looks like a capital A. Anyways, now let's move on to chi. So chi starts with this curved line up top, this horizontal curved line, not vertical, sorry. Starts from the right, goes to the left with a little curve. Our second stroke is then a straight horizontal line underneath it, making sure that this second line is longer than our first one. And our third stroke comes from the middle of our first stroke. It intersects right there. Comes down through our second stroke and then curves off to the left. Now for tsu, which is our downward facing smiley face. So instead of starting from the top, which is what we see in shi, we start with the bottom dash because it's facing down. So start with that first kind of quote unquote I shape, that first little dash, then our second dash off to the side of it to the right, and then we start at the top for our third stroke. Sorry, I had a little bit of a stutter there. For our third stroke, and we bring it down to the left with a curve. All right, let's move on to te. So te kind of looks a little bit like shi if it didn't have the line through the top and the bottom one. Top and bottom horizontal lines. So we start with the first horizontal line, except this one is going to be straight. Unlike chi, it is not curved. It is straight. We have a nice short horizontal line, followed by our second stroke, which is another longer horizontal line. Again, making sure that our bottom one is longer than our top one. And then our third stroke, instead of starting right here at the first one, it intersects with our second stroke and comes down again with a curve to the left. All right, let's move on to to. So to is very simple, not super hard to write. We start with a nice straight vertical line, and then we have a downward slanted horizontal line that comes out of the right of it. It's a little bit closer to the top than it is the bottom, not necessarily in the middle. All right, let's move on to na. So na is going to start with this first horizontal line, followed by our easy second stroke, which is just a curved vertical line that comes through it, curving off to the left again. All right, our next one here is going to be ni. So ni is going to start with a horizontal line up top that is shorter than our bottom. Again, very important that it is shorter. And then another horizontal line underneath it that is longer. All right, let's move on to nu. So nu is going to again have that curved 7 shape. We start with a horizontal line slanted upwards a little bit, and then we bring it down with a curve coming to the left, and then our second stroke is going to intersect it like a T, and it's going to go downwards, curved, and come out to the right. So we start left, go to right. All right. let's move on to ne. So ne is going to be a little bit more complicated, so we're going to try and take this slow. Just stick with me, okay? So ne is going to start up top with this slanted vertical line. This little dash up top. Then underneath it, we're going to have that curved shape again, but as you see, this one is a lot tighter of a curve. It is not super elongated. So we start from the left, slightly slanted horizontal line, and then that curve that comes back down to the left. Making sure that the bottom edge is out further than our top edge. Alright, now our third stroke is going to be a nice vertical line, just a straight vertical line, that meets at that curve of the second stroke. Alright, and then lastly, our fourth stroke is going to be this dash that comes out the right side, making sure that we notice that these two are not connected here. This is supposed to just kind of hover on its own over here. We do not want to connect these two. Alright, let's move on to no. So no is super easy. It's basically just the same downward stroke that we see in tu and sol. So we start up top in the right and bring a curved line down to the left. Alright, let's move on to ha. So ha almost looks like an incomplete rooftop. So we start with our left side, which is going to be a vertical stroke that is slightly curved, coming down to the left. And then our second stroke is going to be another slightly curved line going out to the right and being slanted downwards. Like I said, almost looks like a little incomplete rooftop, making sure that obviously these are not connected right here. Alright, let's move on to he. So he is that little curved L shape that we saw over in se. That nice little curved L shape. And it's also going to have this second stroke that comes, or this first stroke. I'm sorry, I just realized I totally read that backwards. So let's try that again. So he starts with this first horizontal stroke that comes out. So we start left to right, comes out, and then what intersects it is our second stroke, this little curved L shape that we saw before. Alright, let's move on to fu. So fu is gonna start with this nice little horizontal line slanted slightly upwards and bring down a curve back to the left. Like I said, that nice little curvy 7 that we talked about before. It's just all by itself this time. And as we can see, he looks the same as our hiragana he. It is just that little kind of rooftop shape again. We start on the left, come up a little bit, and then back down longer on the other side, making sure that the left side is shorter than the right side. Alright, let's move on to ho. So ho is going to start with this nice horizontal line right here. Then we have this vertical line that comes through it, making sure we leave this kind of antenna or tail at the top, and then it comes down. Then there's a tail that comes out to the left, a little check mark. And then we're going to start with our third stroke with this little dash that comes out underneath the left side, making sure that it's curved, like curved downward almost. It has this curved shape, you can see it right here. And our fourth stroke is going to be curved kind of upwards, and it's going to come out underneath the right side of whole. Alrighty. So let's move over to ma. So ma is gonna make this kind of triangle shape that we see, this incomplete triangle. It's just missing this bottom line right here. So we start with our horizontal line, slanted slightly upwards, and then we bring it down into that angular shape. And then our second stroke is going to intersect the end of our first stroke, making sure that it doesn't come all the way through. It just intersects that bottom line. And it's going to be another slanted downward line. Alright, let's move on to mi. So mi is 3 simple strokes. Our first and second stroke, again, making sure that this is going to be slanted down to the right. Our first and second stroke are going to be the same length. So we start with this first dash up top, then equidistant, we have a second dash underneath it, equidistant obviously from the bottom line. And then we have a longer third stroke that goes underneath both of them. Alright, let's move on to mu. So as you can see, kind of similar to ma, but if we flipped it. So, let's start with that first stroke. We start up top, bringing it down into that angular, almost incomplete triangle shape that we saw before. And then our second stroke is once again going to intercept that bottom line. We start up top and slant it down to the right. Alright, let's move on to me. So me is a very simple one, shouldn't keep you too distracted. Very simple to write. So we start off with this first curved stroke that curves and slants down to the left. And then we have a smaller line that intersects it, almost making it look like an X shape. It's like a really weird kind of X, you know? One line really long, the other one really short, but you can't see that kind of X shape there. But yeah, we have a shorter line that curves down to the right. Alright, let's move on to mo. So mo is going to start with this shorter horizontal line up top, followed by a longer horizontal line underneath it. And then our third stroke is just going to be that soft L shape that we see over here in like he and se. And again, it doesn't go all the way through our first stroke. It just hits underneath it and then comes through our second stroke completely and then curves off into that nice L shape. Alright, now let's move on to ya. So ya is going to start with this first horizontal line slanting upwards, going from left to right. And then you're going to make that check mark shape again, that little tail right here, whatever you want to call it. And then it is going to be intersected with our second stroke, which is going to be a slanted vertical line. And you want to make it almost look like it's tilted one way. You see how, like, because this is slanted upwards and we tilt this off to the right, it just kind of looks like it's slightly turned. We want to make sure it looks like that. And obviously make sure to leave this antenna up top. Like, we want this little right angle right here. We don't want this to be flat to our first stroke. Alright, let's move on to U. So U is going to start with, again, that kind of shape that we see in ma, but smaller. So we're going to take it down to a bit of a smaller scale. So we start with a nice horizontal vertical line, and then we bring a slanted vertical line down, and it's slanted off to the left. And then intersecting that bottom line right there, we have our second stroke, which is going to be a longer line, a longer horizontal line that goes all the way through. Alright, now let's do yo. So yo almost looks like a backwards E. The E of the English language, of course. So let's start building it. Super easy. We start first with that half of a square that we saw over here in Cole. We start with that top half, starting with a vertical or a horizontal line. Sorry, I know I'm stumbling a lot. I apologize. I had a really long day at work. But anyways, yeah, we start with that horizontal line coming down into a slanted line. And then our second and third stroke literally just follow underneath it. They're both going to be the same length here. So we have our second stroke that comes in the middle, and then our third stroke which intersects that bottom line. Alright, let's move on to ra. So ra is going to start with this smaller horizontal line up top, making sure that, again, it is smaller than our part that is going to come underneath here, our second stroke. And then our second stroke is going to start with this longer horizontal line, and then again that curved shape that we've seen many times before, especially in our oo vowels. Alright, let's move on to ri. So ri is very simple. We just start with a smaller vertical line off to our left, and then a longer vertical line to our right that curves underneath that first stroke. Alright, let's move on to ru. So ru, also not very hard. So we start with our first stroke off to the left here, a vertical line that is curved. Make sure that we curve it off to the left. And then our second stroke is going to be a straight vertical line, and then we bring up a curved line to the right. So almost like a weird geometrical J shape. And re is literally just going to be this right side of our ru. So we just come down with our nice straight vertical line, and then we have a curved line that comes out of the right side. All one stroke. So ro is going to be our complete little rectangle, if you want to call it. This one looks a little bit more like a trapezoid. So our first stroke is actually going to be this slanted inward line on the left. So we start there, and then we draw our top half right here with the second stroke. So we come across with our vertical or our horizontal line. Then we bring it down at a slanted vertical one, slanting back, and again, almost creating a trapezoid shape. And then our third line connects the both of them, our third little stroke here. Alright, let's move on to wa. So wa, very simple. We start with this vertical line off to the left side here, shorter than our second stroke, obviously. And then our second stroke intersects with the top of that first stroke, comes across in a horizontal line, and then we bring down that curved, again, 7 shape that we've seen before. Alright, now let's move over to ol. So ol is going to start with this top line right here. This is going to be 3 separate strokes, despite what we want to think about it being all one stroke here. So we start with our first stroke being this longer line up top, and we follow it with our second stroke being a shorter line on bottom. Again, it's really only shorter on our right side here. And then our third stroke is going to be that curved line that we saw kind of in wa here, that little curved line. Alright, and now let's move on to our final katakana that we are going to practice writing, which is n. So n almost looks like so, but again, upturned versus downturned. So instead, our first dash is going to be slanted, but again, we want it to look more like it's facing up. So add maybe a little bit of a curve to it so it looks like it's, again, facing upwards. And then we start with the lower half of our second stroke instead of the top versus what we saw in sol. We start down low, and then we bring it up with a curve to the right. And that is it. We have written all of our katakana. Great job, everybody. I know that I struggled some during that. Again, I do apologize. It will be better. This coming up stuff, it will be better. So let's move on to katakana with diacritical marks. So as we know, just like our hiragana, it is going to have the same base katakana. It's not going to change the way that we write it or anything like that. The only thing that we add are these little almost quotation mark looking things or this little degree symbol looking things. And again, it's going to be the same bases as well. So this is going to be our K's. Kaki kukeko, sashi suseso, tachi tsu teto, hahi fu he ho. It's the same as our hiragana diacritical marks, so no real changes here. They're just written in katakana versus being written in hiragana. So we have ga, gi, gu, ge, go, za, and as we remember from our hiragana, this is ji, not z. This is ji, zu, ze, zo, da. Again, remembering chi goes to G. Tsu goes to zu, as we remember from last time as well. De, do, ba, bi, bu, be, bo, pa, pi, pu, pe, and po. And as long as you went through and remembered your katakana or your hiragana, it carries over to katakana as well, so don't worry about any changes. So now let's move on to contracted sounds. Just like again we saw in hiragana, it's gonna be pretty much exactly the same, just written in katakana. So let's remember that these endings can only go on the ends of E ending vowels, or E ending katakana. So, for example, ki, gi, shi, ji. Let's just keep that in mind whenever we think about contracted sounds. It's always going to be on the end of an E ending katakana. So, let's go over it again. Kya, kyu, kyo. Gya, gyu, gyo. Sha, shu, shyo. Ja, ju, jo. Cha, chu, cho. Nya, nyu, nyo. Hya, hyu, hyo. Bya, byu, byo. Pya, pyu, pyo. Mya, myu, myo. Ya, ryu, ryo. See, just the same as our friend hiragana, so do not sweat. It is just the writing that changes for these. Now, this is where we start seeing changes in katakana versus hiragana. So when it comes to writing long vowels, unlike what we saw in hiragana where you had an extra vowel added after your original hiragana, katakana is going to be written with this dash symbol. So ka, suki, sutsu, keiki, boru. The pronunciation is going to be the same, it is just written differently. And for a little bit of extra weight off your shoulders, katakana will only have long vowels. This means you don't have to worry about small tsu and double consonants. However, we do have some sound exceptions, which these are technically considered contractions. Sometimes we will see katakana followed by small vowels to create new sounds. This is simply because some foreign words have sounds that did not pre-exist in the Japanese language. And as we can see, we have a long list of examples here. Halloween. See how it's that U vowel followed by the E vowel? Obviously a smaller E vowel. That's what makes that contracted U-E sound. Halloween. Highway. U-E. I'm not gonna try to pronounce this because last time I did it, it sounded ridiculous. I think you will hardly ever see someone say mineral water. But anyways, we have uo. And then here we have she, je, che. I think we get the general idea here. Sometimes we will just have katakana that have small vowels to create those foreign sounds that they may not have in Japanese already. Here is some writing practice. Please take a moment to screenshot this if you would like to practice writing these in your own time. I highly recommend it. These are great sheets, and these also show you the stroke order as well, so you can follow along in these little tiny boxes. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and flip to the next one. This is our second writing practice. Again, please be sure to screenshot these if you would like some extra practice in your free time. Alright, now this is gonna be the longest part of our lesson, vocabulary. I know it's gonna suck, but there is flashcards for everything, and we are gonna go through everything. That way it can really stick with you. So please hang tight. Let's make it through this because I know we can. So our base vocabulary, this is going to be split into sections, just so you know. We're going to start with our first section, which is going to be general knowledge. Make sure to study these in your own time, please. I also will be going off and adding some other ones that are in my book that were not in the slideshow. So I'm gonna go over and I will put it into a Japanese keyboard so you can see how it looks as well. And I will also read out Doromaji for you as well. So again, I apologize for missing some. The source that I had for this slideshow was a bit of an older book. So until we get there, let's go ahead and do some vocabulary. Our first one here is going to be ano. So ano is basically gonna mean So this is just what we use when we're trying to think of something. So whenever we have hesitations or pauses, we just use ano. So I will say here that ano is supposed to have an extra u vowel here on the end. I know that it says only ano, but make sure that when you write it to add that extra u vowel in hiragana from before. Because again, this is an older version of the textbook. The more up-to-date one has that extra u vowel. I'm pulling up the list right now, so just bear with me for one moment. Alrighty. Here we go. Moving on to our next one. Ima. So ima is what we use to describe now in this very moment. So if I said ima nanji desu ka, that would be me asking you what time it is right now. And when you're writing these, I would make sure to use the writing that we see in the textbook. The typed writing up here is more stylized and might not be as correct as the writing from the textbook here. Alright, our next one is going to be ego. So ego is the word that we use when we are referring to the English language. If we were asking if someone spoke English, we would use the word ego. Alright, our next one is going to be e. So is basically just going to be a more casual way of saying yes. Its meaning is a bit closer to uh-huh instead of explicitly saying yes. So I would really only use this in very casual situations. Alright, our next one is gakse. So gakse just means student. So if you were trying to say Tanaka is a student, you would say he is a gakse. And I know in the slideshow it has EI. In some versions of the textbook, it is going to have EI. In others, it is going to have that EE, which EE, I guess, would be a little bit more accurate because, again, it is just another elongation of the E vowel. So gakse. All right, our next one here is goal. So goal is just an ending. We use this on the ending of language words, such as eigo. So when we say nihongo, it means Japanese versus saying nihon, which means Japan. And you can see that here in our little example from the textbook. All right, our next one here is koko. So koko, pronounced K-O-U-K-O-Q, not cuckoo, koko, is used to say high school. So if someone is in high school, they attend koko. Alright, our next one is gogo. So gogo means PM. This is what we use when we are telling time past noon but before midnight. Our next one is going to be gozen. Gozen means AM. So again, this is going to be the opposite. This is after midnight but before noon. Our next one here is sai. So sai is the ending we use when talking about age. So when someone says an age, we end it with sai. I mean, obviously that was explicitly said in the first half. So don't mind my little reiteration there. It just means years old. Our next one is another ending. This is san. So san is an honorific meaning Mr. or Mrs. So when we are talking about someone, we are most of the time going to be using san at the end of their name until we learn some other honorific titles. And this is Mrs. as in, or Miss, not Mrs. This is Mr. and Miss. So, someone that is not married. Alright, our next one here is another ending. This is G. So G is the end that we use when we are telling time. So it just simply means o'clock. So like sanji is gonna just mean 3 o'clock. Our next one is another ending again. I know we have a lot of endings right now. This is jin. So jin is the ending that we use when we are referring to people in general, such as Japanese people or American people. For example, Nihonjin means Japanese people. Our next one is senko. So senko means major. This is what we use when we're talking about college majors. And these little asterisks just means that you will see them in the practices for the lesson. Alright, our next one here, sensei, is what we use to refer to our teachers. So I would be Toinki sensei. Alright, our next one, so desu. So desu simply means right. That's right. So if someone is asking, so desu ka? Is that so? We respond with so desu. Our next one, the one that we just mentioned, so desu ka? So so desu ka is essentially asking, is that so? It's mostly to confirm something that you've just heard. It's like, I see, is that so? I know this says so desu, it's meant to say so desu ka. Alright, our next one is daigaku. So daigaku means college. So this is simply what we use when we're referring to a university or college. So for example, if I had Sakura University, it would be Sakura Daigaku. Alright, our next one is denwa. So denwa simply means telephone, but this does not mean smartphones. We will go over that later. There's another word for smartphones. Tomodachi. So tomodachi simply means friend. You don't really need much other context here. It just means friend. Alright, our next one here is namae. So namae was a fun word that we glided over in the live version of our first lesson. This simply means name. So if you were saying the long version of my name is watashi no namae, your name. Alright, our next one is going to be nan/nani. So, oops, sorry. Nani means what. So when we want to ask what by itself, we will just use nani, but when we want to ask, like, what is it, we use nan. And there's a lot of examples where we'll use nan later down the line, such as nanji, which is what time, nansai, how old, nanense, what year of school, and we will get more into it when we start forming question sentences. Alright, our next one is nihon. So nihon is what we use when we're referring to Japan as a country. I was about to say Japanese, when we're referring to Japan as a country. So as we saw earlier, when we added Nihonjin, it became Japanese people. And when we added Nihongo, it became the Japanese language. This is the base here. This just means Japan. Alright, our next one is nensei. So nensei is an ending that we use when we're talking about what year in school we are. For example, ichi nensei means I am a freshman or a first year. Alright, our next one here is going to be hai. So hai is the explicit way of saying yes. This is more direct and more formal. Be sure to use this when questions are being asked by, again, strangers, teachers, elders, etc. Alright, our next one is han. So han is how we say half when we are telling time. So for example, 1:30 or 1:30 would be ichiji han. I know in the example it uses 2 o'clock, so 2:30, niji han. Bango. Bango is just a general way of referring to numbers. So say if we were asking for someone's phone number, we would use denwa bango. The ending that we would use also for bango, like for number, would also be ban. So like nanban would be what number. Alright, our next one. Ryugakse. Ryugakse. This big word just means international student. This is what we use for students that came from overseas. Ryugakse. Alright, our next one is watashi. Watashi is a way to refer to ourselves. However, we really don't use this option often because it can be seen as self-centered. Remember, Japanese is context-based. If it is clear that the subject is you, you don't need to bring up the fact that you are the subject. It sounds self-centered. All right, our next category is going to be countries. This is going to be the countries that we will see in lesson 2 in Katakana. Most of them. There's, I believe, 2 exceptions, and they are Asian countries, so they're going to be in hiragana. Our first one is America. So America is what we know as the United States or America. And there's a little thing in hiragana so you can see which katakana they each are. We have a couple that are not in my slideshow that are going to be in the book. And again, I will go type those out for you when we get to them. Alrighty. Our next one is going to be Igirisu. So Igirisu is what we use for Britain. Make sure that we do not get this confused with the UK. The UK is going to be a smaller territory inside of Great Britain. Our next one is Australia. Australia is Australia. You can tell because it kind of sounds like you're saying Australia with an accent. Australia. Our next one is Kankoku. Kankoku is one of those 2 exceptions that are in hiragana because it is one of those countries that is Asian. This one means Korea. I'm gonna take a second. I'm gonna back out of the slideshow. I'm gonna show you guys the next one, which is Canada. So we have Japanese keyboard. Lexi Logos is a great Japanese keyboard. So I'm gonna type this one out for you. It is ka, or actually it's gonna be in katakana. So it's ka, na, da. And if you need to know how to spell that in Romaji, it is just Canada with a K. Canada. Canada. Now let's move back to our slideshow and go on to our next one, which is in the textbook. Oh no, sorry, this one is not in the textbook, but it is a little bit of extra knowledge. This is Sweden. This one also sounds like you're saying the original country with an accent. This is Sweden. Sweden. Alright, this one is the one in the textbook that I was talking about. This is again another one of our exceptions. This one is China. Chugoku. Chugoku. So before we move on to majors, again, we just have 3 more that I missed. I am so sorry. So let's go ahead and do those now. The first one is going to be India. This is that's in, again, I'm sorry, I keep writing in hiragana. It's going to be in katakana. Indo. Indo. And I will also write it in like a little tab here. It's Indo. That's it. Indo. Our next one is going to be Egypt. This one is Egypto. It is spelled Ejipto. Egypto. Alright, let's move on to our last one. Again, I'm sorry this is so tacky. Our last one is going to be the Philippines. Philippine. Spell that out in Romaji. Philippine. now we can move back to our slideshow again. Sorry, I know it's tacky. We are moving on to majors. These will have some in hiragana and some in katakana. Our first one is going to be kagaku. This one is a hiragana one. This one is science. I know, very general. We will have some other ones that, again, are not in the slideshow that are a little bit more specialized. Alright, our next one is going to be Asia Kenkyu. As you can see, this one is partially in katakana and partially in hiragana. The first part in katakana is Asia and the hiragana part is studies. So this is Asian studies. Asia Kenkyu. Our next one is going to be keizai. Keizai is economics, and as you can see, it is in hiragana. Alright, our next one is a long one, I know. Kokusai kanke. Kokusai kanke. This one is just international relations, quite specific typically for people with marketing or business. Alright, our next one is going to be computer. So this is generally just translates to computer, so we're gonna use this for computer science. Computer. Because nobody is going to college and just studying computer, I don't think. Alright, our next one is Jinrui Gaku. Jinrui Gaku is anthropology. I think we only have one major here that is not in the slideshow. Our next one is seiji. So this is politics. So for us, that is political science. Seiji. Alright, our next one, bijinesu. This one is in katakana. Just as it sounds, this is business. Business. You might want to drop the oo sound. Business. So I'm going to stray here just for a second. We're going to go and do one of the majors that we missed, again with our Japanese keyboard. And the one that we missed is going to be se butsu gaku. Se butsu gaku. And if you need the romaji, it is se butsu gaku. That's how you write it in the romaji. Se butsu gaku. And going back, this is how you write it in hiragana. Seibutsugaku. This just means biology. Alright. Now, back to our presentation. Again, I'm sorry. Our next one is bungaku. This is literature studies. Obviously, this would be Japanese literature. So I'm sure that there are things that we can add to this to make it different types of literature. Alright, our next one is going to be Rekishi. So Rekishi is the study of history. And finally, moving on to our occupations before we move on to our final subject, which is going to be family terms. So our first one, shigoto. Shigoto is just the general word that we use for a job, occupation, or work. Shigoto. Alright, our next one is isha. So isha is just going to be your doctors. These are usually going to be general practitioners. Our next one is kaishain. Kaishain is a general office worker, assistant, data entry, etc. I'm sure there's more specific terms, but this one just means office worker. Our next one is kokosei. Kokosei, remember this word? Koko? It's high school. This is a high school student. See, we can see that se is our common ending here. Our next one is shifu. Because we all know being a housewife is a full-time job. This is housewife. Alright, our next one, daigaku insei. Very important on the in part. Again, we see that ending for student, se, and we see daigaku. But daigaku insei is a graduate student. This is someone who has finished college and are going back for a further education. Okay, our next one, daigakuse. See how it doesn't have the in? This is just a regular college student doing their undergrad work. Alright, our next one is bengoshi. So this is lawyer. We will learn one next that sounds very similar. Please make sure not to get these mixed up. Bengoshi is a lawyer. Now, I know the next one moves on to family, but before we do that, the one that I said sounds similar is kangoshi. Kangoshi means nurse, and I'll type that out right here for you. The only difference is it's kangoshi. It's spelled like this in romaji, and I'm sure you know the hiragana for ka and n. So the only change is here, kangoshi. And I think really the only change is ka versus ben. Bengoshi, kangoshi. Now moving into our final section of vocabulary. This is family terms. Yay! These will be formal titles, and later down the line we will learn more casual titles. So our first one, okasan. Okasan. Okasan is what we use for our mothers. Our next one is otosan. Otosan is what we use for our fathers. Our next one is going to be onesan. So onesan is what we use for our older sisters. Our vocab for older and younger are going to be different. So note this is our older sisters. Alright, our next one is onisan. Onisan is our older brothers. Again, I'm just saying, brothers, this can be used as a plural or a singular. Plurals aren't really a thing that you're gonna see with these words. So it's not gonna be like oni-sans. It's just oni-san to refer to your older brother. Next is imoto. Imoto is for our younger sister. Our next one is ototo. Ototo is our younger brother. And we have concluded vocabulary. Great job, everyone. Round of applause for making it this far. We are now going to move into sentences and grammar. So there's going to be a lot of text here, and we're going to read, don't worry. So the first thing that we'll start with is stating with an explicit subject. And for that, we're going to be using the format of X, Y, Y this. This is describing X, a person or a thing, as item Y. So translated, it would be X is Y. So as you can see up here, X is Y. As for X, it is Y. For example, Senko wa Nihongo desu. Senko, remember that word? My major. Wa is Nihongo, the Japanese language. My major is the Japanese language. Senko wa Nihongo desu. Yamashita-san wa sensei desu. Mr. Yamashita is a teacher. So that is what we use if our subject is clear. Now, what do we use if our subject is not clear? Or that's what we use if our subject is not clear. I'm sorry, I got those mixed up. This next one is going to be what we use if the sentence of the subject is clear, if we know who we're already talking about. For example, gakusei desu. All that changes is we omit that subject X. So in this sentence, let's just say I was introducing myself. It is obvious then that we are already talking about me, so I just have to say gakusei desu to let them know that I am a student. This next one, 12時半です. It is obvious with G that we are talking about time. So you don't have to go ima wa 12時半です, because, you know, if you're saying that, someone probably already asked you the time. They probably asked you, ima wa nanji desu ka? Then you just respond with the time. It's very clear what we're talking about. So next, we're going to move into building question sentences. Don't worry, it is not hard. It is actually super simple to turn a Japanese sentence into a question sentence. And all it really takes is adding ka at the end of a statement to turn it into a question. For example here, ryugakusei desu means I am an international student. But what if I add ka at the end? Ryugakusei desu ka? Switches it to are you an international student? Because you wouldn't be asking am I an international student? It's clear that you're talking about the other person that you're saying that to. And now that we know how to form our basic questions, what if I want to ask what something is? This is where our nan/nani comes in. For example, I want to ask what time it is. Then I would use nanji. Maybe how old? Nansai. And lastly, what about our year in school? Nannensei. So let's pose an actual question using nan. Senko wa nan desu ka? If I am the one responding here, it is obvious that I am the subject, so I will simply reply with my major. No subject needed. So say I'm an English major. I say, eigo desu. They know that I'm a major of English. You don't have to say, senko wa eigo desu. They know that you're already talking about you. And our next one is going to be possessive sentences. I know in the last one, in the question sentences, I forgot to mention how to ask for somebody's phone number. That's when we use non-ban. Remember when we talked about ban being an ending for asking for a number? Non-ban. So now we can move forward into possessive sentences now that you know that. So possessive sentences is where we connect two nouns using no. Though being possessive is not the only role that no can play, such as Sakura Daigaku no Gakusei means a student at Sakura University. Gakusei serving as the main idea, a student, while the second noun Sakura Daigaku makes it specific. So let's do some examples here. Takeshi-san no denwa bango. Takeshi-san being the subject, no, connecting the two of them, denwa bango. So we have phone number of Takeshi. It's almost backwards. You see that? Denwa bango, phone number, no, of Takeshi-san. Daigaku no sensei. Daigaku no sensei. A college teacher. Sensei, a teacher, no, of daigaku, college, a teacher of college. Nihon no daigaku, a college in Japan or a college of Japan. Remember, daigaku, no, meaning of Nihon, Japan. So, University of Japan. And obviously that wouldn't be like if we were trying to say this is the University of Japan. It is just specifying a university in Japan. Now the next thing that you need to know is noun 1, no, noun 2 basically acts as one big noun. This means that you can put it wherever in a sentence that allows a noun. This is going to be a long example, so hold on. Takeshi-san no oka-san, meaning, remember, mother of Takeshi. So Takeshi's mother wa koko no sensei desu. Remember, sensei of high school. Koko no sensei desu, meaning Takeshi's mother is a high school teacher. Alright, let's move on to numbers and time. This is going to be a fun one. So we're going to start with counting in numbers. It is very easy to learn how to count in Japanese as well. They have a very simple counting system. So we're going to start with 1 through 10, and then I will teach you how to make numbers past 10. You will also notice that some numbers have alternate readings. These will be used in certain scenarios like reading time. So for 0, we have 0. これ 1 1 2 2 3 3 4 4 or she or yo 5 5 6 6 7 7 or shichi, also 7 8 8 9 or ku, also 9, and ju being 10. Repeat these to yourself as many times as you need. Go through them, learn them. So now let's learn how to make numbers past 10. So numbers past 10 follow a certain order. Let's go over it. It will go number plus 10 plus number. For example, if I wanted to make 23, I'd go ni, number, plus ju, 10, plus san, number. And altogether we get ni, ju, san, and we get 23. But what if we want the 10 to be the base? 11, 12, 13, all the way through 20. Then it's just 10 plus number, so juni. And then we get juni, which gives us 12. The only change we will see is when we start adding 100s, which is hyaku, but it follows the same format. Number plus hyaku, 100, plus number plus 10 plus number. I know that sounds confusing, but if I wanted to make, say 223. 223. And we have 223. And we can see this in our patterns. See here? 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. So, now that we know our numbers, let's move into telling time. So we will use the numbers from before plus G to start telling time by the hour. If we have a half hour, then we add han at the end to signal a half hour. You will have 3 alternate readings when telling time, those being yoji, which remember we saw yo as an alternate reading, 4, shichiji, 7, and kuji, 9. These are each of our hours through 12. Let's go through them. We have ichiji, niji, sanji, yoji, goji, rokuji, shichiji, hachiji, kuji, juji, juichiji, juniji, and then this is our half hour, ichiji han. So let's practice telling time without AM or PM. Read each of the clocks and I will tell you the number and out loud say what the time is. Number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Apologies, I was sneezing. Alright, so now that we just learned how to tell time without AM and PM, let's add AM and PM into our telling time. It is so simple to add AM and PM. We just add the little word that we use for AM or PM before the time. For example, gozen yoji is 4 p.m. Gogo shichiji is 7 a.m. So I'm going to read each of them and you're going to tell me what time it is. Number 1. Remember to use our AMs and PMs. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. And feel free to pause in between each number if you need a little more time to figure out how to tell the time. This is just the practice I asked my students in the live lesson in Japanese. So now let's move over to reading phone numbers. We are almost done. It is just this and ages. We got this, guys. Reading phone numbers. Reading phone numbers is also, again, super easy. All we do is say each number and add no where each dash is. For example, 281-5762. We would read it ni, hachi, ichi, no, go, nana, doku, ni. Take a moment and I'm going to say each number and you practice reading me each of the telephone numbers. Number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. All right, now that we've learned how to say phone numbers, congratulations, pat on the back. I'm gonna teach you how to ask for a phone number. I know that it is not written in the slide itself, so I'm gonna read you from the textbook how to ask for someone's phone number. Please use your listening ears, listen closely. I'm only gonna say it once. Just kidding, I'll say it like 2 or 3 times so you can understand how to ask for a phone number. So we ask for someone's phone number by saying, 電話番号は何番ですか? All together. 電話番号は何番ですか? And I'm going to say it one more time slow. Ready? 電話番号は何番ですか? And finally, we're going to move into reading ages. So, reading ages, we will see some exceptions here. One last thing to know. When reading and writing, we will have 4 exceptions to the usual pattern of number plus sai. Those being isai, which is 1, hasai, being 8, jusai, being 10, and hatachi, being 20. When asking for ages, we would use nansai. So we would say, nansai desu ka? So let's go through each of them. Isai, 1-year-old. Nisai, 2-year-old. Sansai, 3 years old. Yonsai, 4 years old. Gosai, 5 years old. Rokusai, 6 years old. Nanasai, 7 years old. Hasai, 8 years old. Kyusai, 9 years old. Jusai or Jisai, 10 years old. Juisai, 11 years old. And hatachi. So hatachi is usually used for 20, but nijusai is also acceptable. And once we start getting over that, you just have niju isai, and that would be like 21. Niju nisai, 22. It is just hatachi for 20. Not 21, not 22, nothing above it. Just 20. So we learned a lot today. Finally, we have our recap. Do not be afraid to go back and review. Pause, rewind, do whatever you need to do to review this. We covered katakana and where to use it. A long list of vocabulary. This is on page 4 of the Genki Elementary Japanese 1 3rd edition textbook. We learned how to use proper grammar and omitting subjects, possessive sentences, question sentences, counting and numbers, telling time with and without AM and PM, and how to read and write ages. Finally, thank you for coming to class. It was so awesome to have you guys. The next lesson we will cover shopping, how to use 1,000 and 10,000, and how to use this thing here, that thing there, and that one over there, using direction words. We will also be learning sentences with mo, which is the equivalent of and or to. We will also learn dare no, which is whose. The negative statement janai desu or arimasen. And finally, the uses of ne and yo as sentence endings. So thank you so much for coming. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you liked the video, and I will continue to keep uploading lessons. But for now, goodbye. This is Tactical Twinkie out.